Hello and welcome to the FatBoss Guide to Mannoroth.
And this encounter is relatively long and not too difficult once you get your head around it, but ultimately it's all about the last phase. The last phase is the most difficult part of the encounter and it becomes a little bit hectic.
Now for this fight you do want to bring 2 tanks, about 1 healer per group, and a mixed DPS makeup. Just make sure you don't bring too many melee DPS, otherwise they can't switch to a certain type of ad and you're going to have some issues.
Now as we have so much to cover, let's just kick straight into it and talk about phase 1. Now in this particular phase, Mannoroth isn't actually active, and instead you have to deal with 3 Fel Summoners. Each of these summoners don't actually have any abilities, instead they will just be responsible for summoning particular type of ads, and these ads just spawn in quicker and quicker the longer this phase lasts. When you defeat a summoner, the ad that they summon will no longer be summoned in this phase. So what you need to do is just go from summoner to summoner, kill them off, and then that will trigger phase 2. To start off, you want to start on the right hand summoner, because he summons the Doom Lords, and these are the worst type of ads.
Now the way Doom Lords are summoned is that a random player will receive a debuff called a Curse of a Legion. Now this is a curse debuff that lasts for around 12 seconds, and when it is dispelled or when it expires, it will hit the player for a large amount of shadow damage and also spawn a Doom Lord. Now the Doom Lords have a horrible stacking tank debuff, which is applied with every melee hit. Once it expires, the tank will take around 35k shadow damage per stack of this Doom Spike debuff. Now make sure that the stack doesn't go too high by either swapping or killing off the Doom Lord super quick. Like if it goes above 8, you can kind of get into super scary, I'm gonna get one shot territory. So just make sure you switch frequently or the ad just dies quickly.
The Doom Lord will also place debuffs on players called Mark of Doom. This debuff lasts 15 seconds and makes it so if you do not take any damage over this 15-second period, you'll instantly die. It's a death mechanic. However, if you take any damage whatsoever, the Mark of Doom will be removed, but you'll do a load of shadow damage to anyone within 20 yards of you. So when these debuffs come in, make sure you're not stood near anything that can deal damage to you, and then run into the middle of the room. There's a pool of green shit. This will remove the mark, and you can go back to killing the summoners.
The Doom Lords also have an interruptible Shadow Bolt volley. You can use this to trigger the Mark of Dooms if you want, but it's not really needed. Most of the time you just want to interrupt this and generally kill this guy as soon as you possibly can. Now as soon as you've killed the right hand side summoner, you want to go to the far side of the room, as this summoner is responsible for summoning Fel Imps. When these Fel Imps spawn, they will cause a large amount of firebolts to come crashing down at players' locations, and these will deal some fire damage within 3 yards. So if you're all stacked up on one point, you'll probably be one shot, so make sure you are spread at least 3 yards. Now these imps will just spam Fel Blast, which will deal some damage to a random player and anyone within 3 yards of them, so once again remain spread, and they'll also teleport around every now and then. If you have a Death Knight that can mass grip these into a solar beam, that's like amazing. Just generally want to AoE them down quickly, get them out of the way, because they're just irritating more than anything else.
And the last summoner you'll be dealing with is the guy that spawns the Dread Infernals. Now when these Infernals spawn, they'll create a large targeting circle which indicates where they're about to land. If you stand inside this circle when they do land, you'll take a load of damage, so make sure you're not on top of them. All these Infernals will do is just channel Hellfire. This just deals a load of fire damage to anyone within 10 yards of them, which means melee, you can't really attack them. As soon as this Hellfire cast is finished, they'll just relocate to a new area, deal the same amount of damage when they land, and start channeling Hellfire again. Just have your ranged DPS nuke these down as soon as they possibly can. So they're all the ads you have to deal with in phase 1, and it's up to you what order you really want to kill them in. We'd recommend that you do it at the right, then at the back, and then on the left, and then as soon as you've killed all 3, phase 2 will start.
Now in phase 2, the Infernals and the Fel Imps will start spawning again, however you will no longer have to deal with the Doom Lords, which is amazing because they're a pain in the ass. And now you have to deal with the Skeletal Mannoroth, which looks pretty cool.
Now for your tanks to worry about is something called the Glaive combo. Now this is 2 different abilities that hit your tanks. First, the boss will cast Glaive Thrust. This deals a massive amount of physical damage and applies a really nasty dot. However, if you have any form of active mitigation up when this comes in, you will not receive the dot, so it's important that you have something up just so you don't get affected. Shortly after that, you'll be hit by Massive Blast. This will just hit you for a shit ton of magical damage and send you flying across the room. This also leaves a debuff on you that increases the amount of damage you take from this ability by 300% for 45 seconds. As soon as the Massive Blast is over, he'll then just do another Glaive Thrust. So the best way to deal with this ability is have one tank first take the Glaive Thrust, and then have that tank also take the Massive Blast. While the guy is in midair, you want your other tank to quickly taunt, so he takes the last Glaive Thrust. The next time this ability comes in, you want your tank to switch roles. So the second tank now wants to be taking the first Glaive Thrust and the first Massive Blast, and then have your other tank taunt for the last Glaive Thrust. This way your debuff won't affect the extra damage you'll be taking from this Massive Blast.
Now, due to the knockback from the Massive Blast, you really need to make sure that you keep the boss towards one edge of the room and face him towards the center, and it just makes it so your tanks won't go flying off the edge, because of course you die when that happens. It also helps you completely cheese an ability called Mannoroth's Gaze. Now, this will fear a couple of players for 4 seconds, and when the fear has timed out, the feared player will do a bunch of shadow damage, which is split between anyone within 8 yards. Now, when you are feared, you run directly away from the boss. So if you have the raid at the arse of the boss, which is located at the left-hand pillar, the feared players will just walk into the pillar. Doing it this way means that you can pretty much keep everyone together, and you don't really need to be chasing after these feared players because they're all going to be in one spot, and you can just have a bunch of people all soak the damage at the same time. Now, there can be some harsh overlap points, such as when Infernals or Imps spawn at the exact same time as the fear goes out. When this does happen, we just use some sort of DR to keep players alive. And also, there is a chance, by the way, that you will clip through the pillar and fall to your death.
Yeah.
It's rare, but it can happen.
Good job, Liz. Now, in this phase, the boss will also cast Fel Hellstorm. This just cools down a barrage of meteors on top of players over a 5-second period. Don't stand in these meteors, it's indicated by a shadow on the ground. It isn't too much of a big deal, just avoid them. Another ability the boss has is Fel Seeker. Now, this is a series of 3 explosions that start and remain on a random player's location. The first explosion is small, but the next 2 get larger and larger and also deal more damage. If you aren't fast enough moving out and you do get hit by it, you'll also be knocked back, and this can easily throw a player off the platform, so make sure you move very, very quickly. We found out that you didn't really need to organize exactly where this landed at any time. Just make sure you move from it and return back to this pillar location just to make sure you're ready for the next Mannoroth Gaze.
Now, throughout this phase, it is super important that you really keep up with all the waves of ads that come in. The Imps aren't too much of an issue, but the Infernals can really cause problems if you just let them get out of control. So all ranged DPS, you should be 100% responsible for killing them before they move, because if they relocate at the same time as a Gaze or anything like that, it can cause some massive, massive issues.
So just to recap this particular phase, tanks, when the Glaive combo comes in, make sure that you're knocked towards the middle of the room so you don't get completely thrown off the platform. When the Fel Hellstorm comes in, make sure you don't get hit by it. When the Fel Seeker comes in, make sure you run away from it. And when the Mannoroth Gaze comes in, have your entire raid team stacked on top of all the players, and you'll be healed up nice and quickly, as well as, of course, dealing with all the ads and killing them off as soon as you possibly can. After you've done this until the boss hits around 65%, this is when phase 3 will start.
Now, at the beginning of this phase, Mannoroth does get its flesh back, and Imps will no longer spawn in this phase. Gul'dan will also destroy the pillar at the back of the room, and this is the reason that your raid is on the left-hand pillar during the second phase, because that pillar lasts until the last phase, so that's why you're stacked up there. Now, Mannoroth keeps all of the same abilities, however he gains one more, which is Shadow Force. This will debuff 3 people with Shadow Force and start pushing them off the side of the platform. At first it's not too fast, but it gets quicker and quicker. Now, the pushback effect does come from Mannoroth himself, so you can deal with this in the exact same way that you dealt with the Mannoroth's Gaze ability. Just make sure you're pushed up against the pillar. That way you don't even have to run against it to stay on the platform, and you can literally stand there and continue casting if you want to. Healers just make sure that these players are spot healed, as this ability can hit them pretty hard, and if you ignore them, they're probably gonna die, so just keep an eye on them.
Apart from that, this phase is pretty much the same as phase 2. You use the exact same strat. Make sure you still do the combo, etc. You still make sure you stand in the same place for Gaze. Make sure you did move for the Fel Seeker, blah, blah, blah. It's the exact same until you hit 35%, and this is when the 4th and final phase will start, and this is where shit gets real. In this phase, every single ability the boss has becomes empowered, and most importantly, the pillar that you've been using to cheese every single mechanic he's thrown at you has now been destroyed, meaning you actually have to do the fight correctly. Now, in this phase, his Felstorm lasts forever. He'll cast it immediately as soon as you transition, and he won't cast it again, and you'll have constant meteors coming down, and it becomes more intense the longer the fight goes on.
Now, the Glaive combo in this phase has become absolutely fucking insane. The Glaive Thrust does the same, thing, however it now deals damage in a large line in front of the boss, rather than just a single hit on the tank. This means that you have to have only one tank in front of the boss and nobody else, otherwise that person's going to take so much damage and you're going to die. Now, Massive Blast is still only single target, however when the boss does this ability, he also sends out a bunch of waves in front of him. If you are hit by these waves, you are also flung across the room and take loads of damage, as if you were hit by a Massive Blast again. So for when this new glaive combo comes in, you want to make sure that absolutely nobody apart from the tank is in front of the boss, with the raid stacked up on one side of the boss and the tank on the other side of the boss. This will allow you to take the first two parts of the combo and then taunt for the last glaive thrust, which will be directed away from the raid. Now, for the poor tank that has just been thrown across the other side of the platform, do be aware that these waves are going to be hitting you very shortly afterwards, so try and sidestep them as soon as you can and run back towards the raid.
Now, the gaze in this phase is completely changed. It still works the same in the fact that it will still fear targets, and at the end of it, it will deal split damage to everyone that is nearby. However, when it does deal this split damage, it will also spawn a pool of shadowy shit. Now, the size of this pool depends on how many people actually soaked it. So what you'll want to do is send the bare minimum amount of players within these feared player circles, just so these pools are as small as possible. If you have the entire raid in it, it literally covers the entire platform, and it deals quite a large amount of ticking damage. The best players to send in to help soak these are almost definitely players with high damage reductions or immunities. Hunters and stuff like that are just brilliant for it. The idea is, people get feared, you send the bare minimum amount of players in it, and as soon as the pools are formed, you quickly move back to the boss. And the reason why you do this is because you now need to deal with the empowered Shadow Force.
Now, the Shadow Force still just pushes players off the side of the room, however, instead of it being only 3 people, it's everyone now. Yay. Hooray! But of course, you don't have a pillar to carry you for this ability anymore. So when this came in, we made sure that everyone was in melee range and we had like a stampeding roar for each one. This allowed us to outrun the pushback and not be pushed off the side of the platform. Now, using some sort of healing CD such as AM or Revival will help keep players topped up while on the move, because of course, Shadow Force still does some damage to you, and you need to remain topped up because there's a bunch of the fucking Hellstorm coming down, so it's not really that nice.
As soon as this first Shadow Force is finished, you want to use your speed increase that you gain from the ability to run to the opposite side of the boss, and that's when you'll see your first empowered Fel Seeker. Now in this phase, it works the exact same way in every single fashion. It will just grow bigger. If you're hit by it, you get knocked back. But the only difference is that this Fel Seeker will deal damage to everyone regardless, so you need your healers to top everyone up. You don't necessarily need to use a healing cooldown, but you just need to make sure that everyone's topped immediately afterwards, because after this point, you'll then get enough of Mannoroth's gaze, and then you'll get another pushback. And after this second pushback, you should really look at having the boss killed.
Yeah, it just gets more and more messy from this point, and it gets to a point, if you get the next set of gazes, it's generally a good idea to just let those people die.
Yeah.
So you can just finish off the boss. So yeah, this phase can just get mega hectic. It's all about making sure that you keep the Mannoroth gaze pools as small as possible, while making sure that you're positioned in the right place so you're not just thrown across the side of the platform when the Shadow Force comes in. And assuming that you can do those two things while staying alive, the boss should hopefully fall over before you do.
But thank you very much for watching, guys. If this guy did help you out, then please do drop us down a like. Helps us out a lot, and we shall see you in the next video.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.